I work at a farm around Scranton area, if anybody's familiar with it. My wife and I manage a farm, Overlook Farm, which is fairly diverse farm in the fact that we have, kind of a range of market farm produce. We raise hogs, forest raised, pasture raised hogs, pasture raised poultry. We have some small scale operations too. We have a small apiary and a small mushroom log operation. But the main driver, the main enterprise on the farm is vegetables. So it's a little bit dark. This is an aerial view. You can kind of see our vegetable field there. But there are surrounding fields that we do utilize for poultry, for pigs. We're not haying at this point, so we have about 30 acres of pasture that we utilize, or eventually we're going to turn into pasture for cattle. At this point, we're at a mowing regime to kind of favor different cold season grass species. If you can kind of see, so right here in our vegetable field, we have greenhouses, we have 2 vegetable barns, we have a livestock barn, and we have a 10-acre field that we rotate 5 acres cash, 5 acres cover. So that'll come into play in terms of as we're integrating poultry into that, or thinking about integrating poultry into that. That isn't by design for poultry, but it works with the design for poultry. So we raise for poultry. We raise the kind of standard industry standard Cornish cross, which we, as I'm sure if anybody's doing Cornish cross, you're doing the same thing. We're buying them in as chicks. We brew them 3 weeks, depending on the weather. We put them out in the field. They're out for 4 weeks. Raise them to 7, and we process them on site. And then there are layers ranging in that top right picture. That is, and you can kind of see the row, the beds from our vegetable operation. That was last spring. We had them ranging on a winter rye legume mix. So, I would say we try and take a step back and think about how this is going to integrate into the vegetables. And one of the ways we do it is developing goals. So we develop goals for the farm. We have a mission statement for the farm. We have goals for the farm. And these are just goals that I kind of just penned out specifically for this talk, and how we would look at integrating poultry, and where we would assess and where we would evaluate and where we would draw the lines of where we're going to either not range poultry in a vegetable field, if we're going to not range poultry at all, if we just stop poultry production, if we, it's basically a way to assess where we're at. Are we happy? Are we making money? Are we treating the agroecological system with respect? So that's our first goal, is to manage the whole area as kind of a fluid, interchanging environment. So instead of having walls up where we view this is the farm, this is the landscape, and there's not really a mixture, we definitely, and I'm sure everybody here sees that, but we try and either through something quantitative or something qualitative, try and look at what our impact is. And that could be, we're working with SUNY Syracuse to do some water testing upstream, downstream from us in terms of nutrient loads and water. And just to backtrack, we are a nonprofit, so we run an apprenticeship program. We also partner with a couple of universities, SUNY Syracuse and the University of Oregon, to run either landscape architecture programs or like bio surveys, agricultural or environmental. Are we meeting the needs of pasture-raised poultry? So, being pasture-raised, we have the fundamental aspects of pasture-raised poultry, which to us is clean air, clean water, clean feed, nutritious feed, forage, and movement. And if we're missing any of those, then we don't see it as being pastured. So are we addressing the needs of annual crops? Again, that's what is driving the farm. We make the most money with it. That's where 75% of our attention is. So if we are doing something detrimental to the crops, then we're going to stop the poultry operation. Providing customers with the best tasting, healthiest meat, eggs, and produce. Very qualitative stuff in that, best tasting. But the healthiest we do get very kind of nuts and bolts about. So not necessarily saying nutrient dense or we don't test our produce, but healthiest in terms of food safety. This is a big barrier for us in terms of if we are out of compliance with it, we stop it again. So again, going back to our goals, if we're not providing healthy food, we're not gonna do it. So we have general procedures in terms of training for staff, and I won't go into like very into the procedure itself, unless maybe later we can, if you want to ask how we do it, we can talk about it during like a Q&A part. But just for time's sake, we do a standard training, which for apprentices, for anybody who's working with us, that we actually get them to sign off on, to say, and that's a good, just the same way for the goals, it's a good way for us to say mid-season, end of season, here's your evaluation. If you are being sloppy with manure and produce, you're not here. You're going to be rerouted in some way. Maybe you're just doing vegetable production and you're not working with the animals. So that's our way to secure that. And I think one way that I frame it to people, new people coming in, is that we feel that the farm and the health of the produce that we're producing is translates across the spectrum in terms of small scale agriculture. So if we say somebody's sloppy with manure around salad greens, somebody gets sick, that's not only going to affect our farm, it's going to affect the public perception of all the farms at the market. It's going to kind of, in some ways, I feel like a lot of people just view big ag as sterile, safe. It's like the gold standard for food safety, and we want to challenge that. And we want people to understand that small scale local agriculture is safe, can be safe as long as we're following certain procedures. So that's what we kind of frame it to people coming in is you're representing this movement basically, and if you're disrespecting the health of that, then that undercuts the entire movement of small scale local. So we are not, and I don't know if anybody's at the scale that wants FSMA would actually be regulated, if it is regulated, if there's enough money to regulate it, all those kind of questions. We were not at that scale that we would be an exempt grower once FSMA is Food Safety Modernization Act, once it's in place, years down the line. But we're basically gearing ourselves to take all of the steps to be in compliance. So record keeping, following raw manure application, the 90 days for manure touching, for a crop that's touching the ground, like salad mix, spinach, 120 days for something that's aerial, corn, okra. Although I know that, I was talking to some apple growers that are basically planning on, if they have some low leaning bough branches that an apple's touching the ground, they're just scrapping it. So that's where, people are kind of, and the people I've talked to are kind of prepping for it in that way. The same way we're prepping for it, just record keeping, getting all of your procedures in line. So marketing and sales, we have to think about that whenever we're going to a market. How are we separating that and keeping it safe? So, for example, so we'll bring boneless breasts and salad mix to a market, completely separate containers. But somebody who comes to the market says, oh, can I see a pack of boneless breasts? Let me see what it looks like. We pick it up. Oh, can I also have a bag of salad mix? So how are you going to deal with, or how, that was a question we had, is how do we deal with a leaky boneless breast package? Because we shrink bag, so it's going to leak a little bit. How do we deal with that? So we have hand washing station, hand sanitizers. So we move down a line and we kind of create that intermediary zone. So there's dirty, there's intermediary, there's clean. Same way if anybody processes poultry, you have your slaughter, your cones, you have your skull or plucker, that's your dirty zone, and you completely separate that from your clean zones. So we always try and create that for food safety. Here's on the southwestern side, about 4.5 on the northeastern side. So we rotate that every 2 years, and that does allow us to have, again, that intermediary separation, so we can run poultry on a field if we want to. So the southwestern part, you can see it's kind of got that gray. That is, we just mowed this is last summer, we just mowed a rye and legume mix that was overwintered, that we had our layers on during the spring. And we're about to incorporate that, and we did a sorghum pea oat kind of cocktail mix after that, which now we're planning on using. We're using that field this year. So you can kind of see remay lines up and down here. We were producing there last year. So this year, after a little bit of manure application, we are going to produce there this year. So this is, whenever we're thinking about, sorry about the pictures. Whenever we're thinking about things, we usually try and think 3 or 4 years down the line. So, for that field last June, we were planning on how are we going to prep the field, and how are we going to time our cover crop for it to be usable for poultry to graze on it, that it's going to be an acceptable pasture, basically. And then how are we going to time that to then go into cover crop and then into a cash crop production? So I use this as an example. So we have potato production, which we get out, say, August, September. That gives us time in early September to prep the field. And our field prep is basically for a poultry operation, or for pasturing poultry here, we want to create a completely level surface. So, and if who runs broilers here? Okay, so when you run broilers, depending on your system, our system is, if you can kind of see, we have the dome. I forget the name of the style of coop, but it's 2x4s, 2x4 frame that we're dragging on the ground. And if you have undulations, that allows predators in, you're wasting time moving, so your efficiency is declined, which we try and move each coop take 3 minutes to feed water and move each coop. So that is going to just slow us down. If we have huge aggregates of soil or cover crop in our way, it's going to slow us down. It's also maybe going to let predators in. Chickens are going to get out. Maybe they're going to get hurt as we start moving the coops. So thinking about all that stuff. And then we put a cover crop in, say mid-late September. It's going to overwinter, and then once we turn our first round of broilers out on pasture or on the cover crop in spring, we have a cover crop in place. Something for them to graze, something for them to forage with. So, what kind of poultry do you guys do? Or does anybody do poultry? Or all vegetable growers? Okay.
I have poultry that's not in the veggie.
Okay. All right. So the goals for the cover cropping for us are building organic matter, sequestering nutrients, or sequestering carbon, creating a place for beneficials. Maybe we're dealing with a pest issue, reduced erosion. So that's a lot of that is just strictly vegetable production. And we have a cropping cycle where we're trying to time it out, like I was talking about before, for grazing, and making sure we have time for control for our cash crop, which is coming in, say, after poultry. And also just thinking about what the cash crop was before and what the cash crop is going to be after cover cropping and poultry. And then the final thing we think about is the palatability for poultry. So these are groups of covers that we do use and have seen to varying degrees poultry grazing on them. And whenever I say grazing, I realize that they're not taking any sort of majority of their feed from it, but I do also know that it is it's an additive. It's creating a different product for us in the end. They have a different taste. They have a different fat composition. So the one thing that we usually try and keep in is clover, which I guess I don't have it in the spring summer. So they do seem to like clover the best, and buckwheat. They go crazy for buckwheat, but the reason I have them up here in this kind of time frame is that this is what works for us in terms of if we fall sow something like we had in that example with the potatoes, that's going to be ready for them in the spring. If we're sowing something in the summer, we want to make sure that we have enough time for the poultry to utilize it, but then we want to make sure we can control it later. So most of that, I think maybe all of that is frost kill, except for the winter rye. So if we want to frost kill something, we want to make sure that we have control over it. If we have something in late, if we have poultry in late, we can also have the ability to frost seed it. So maybe we leave poultry on a piece of ground too long, and it is maybe they denude it, which we obviously try not to. And we might have to mulch it just to keep the soil covered over the winter, but then as soon as spring, or as soon as, say, February comes, we start frost feeding it so that we have a living cover first thing in the spring. This is also a pretty big stopping point, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but we do take soil tests beginning and end of the season. So if we are deficient in something, we're going to amend for it, and we use mineral amendments. Poultry manure is going to supply some amendments, but the difficulty is that it's not that the mineral amendments you can pick and choose. I want to supply 90 pounds of calcium, and I'm going to use gypsum, and I need to use K-Mag to take care of the potassium and magnesium. So we're able to choose the specific weights that we want. Poultry manure is just going to give you all at once, obviously. So in this instance, we are actually, we're already in excess of phosphorus, not by a lot, but if we do run poultry on this particular land, which is that's northeastern side of the vegetable field. So this is what our soil test gave us. We are going to be over in phosphorus. So we most likely, not that that's, I don't, to me, that's not a crazy excess, but we probably wouldn't run poultry on it until we draw some of that down. And through harvest, because we're obviously with vegetables, we're extracting not a great deal of phosphorus unless we're like either haying or grain crop removal or something like that. But we are mining nutrients out through vegetable food. The difficulties that we see. So this is a couple shots of our field. So we have a semi-permanent raised bed system, and we do use or at this time we were using a rye and clover in our furrows, but I since switched that to just strictly Dutch white clover for time saving because we're mowing it too much. I felt like so one of the problems besides balancing nutrients, which we had talked about, is we like the fact that we're not disturbing the soil, and if we're running poultry, we can't have a raised bed system. We're flattening that all out, and we've never done a bioassay of our soil or an assessment, but just academically, I guess, or theoretically, we want that symbiotic mycorrhizal connection to be intact, and it's going to help us with some crops. So if we're disturbing that and we're flattening it out so we can run broilers over it, we are disturbing that symbiosis, that web connection that we're trying really hard to develop. So other difficulties have been timing for us, because cover crop is growing, and sometimes it seems like exponentially day by day. In the spring, you get a lot of great conditions. You have soil moisture, you have your sunlight. It's just taken off in the spring. And what happens with the broilers is we notice that they like a certain height, a certain stand where it's palatable. It's not getting to be lignified, as in, it's not getting very stocky, it's not heading, or it's not even in a boot kind of stage for the cover crop. And what happens for us is whenever we, in terms of the poultry management, if we're moving them across a pasture or a cover crop, and the cover crop's too big, we've been noticing a lot of foot sores, because there isn't that biological soil that's interacting with their manure and kind of incorporating it into the soil, if that makes sense. It's just sitting on top of the grass, so they get these hot pads on their feet. They start getting infections, or they could get a bumble, or an abscess. And then we have noticed whenever we have gotten a little sloppy with that management, that our dressed weights do go down, because they're not as comfortable, moving to water, moving to feed. They're stressed out, and obviously any stress you're doing on something as potentially stressed out as a Cornish crossbird could be detrimental, very quickly. One thing that I don't have on here for management difficulties is also, we're working other parts of that field. We're prepping the cover crop for, say, 2018. And Cornish cross do not like tractors driving by them, or they don't like clunky rocks flying all around. That's a quick way to give them a heart attack, or just, again, stressing. I mean, you want to make it, in a production sense, you want to make their life as easy as possible, so that you're giving them everything they need, spoon feeding them basically, to get them to a certain point. And your feed conversion ratio is for them. So we try and shoot for about a 2.3 feed conversion ratio for Cornish cross. It's going to drastically increase as you stress them out. Again, food safety, we already talked about. The porosity of the soil compaction is always an issue, so we try and keep, again, permanent furrows. So if you have a coop and you have to get to these birds every day, you're dragging a 100-pound coop along the ground, and you're slogging through a wet condition, you're not doing your soil necessarily a good favor. So how it's just a question maybe you have to ask, how are you going to address that through your tillage, through just other mitigations. We use a chisel plow. Again, we're disrupting the soil through that method, but that would alleviate some of those concerns for us to a certain extent. Terrain is also a concern. You can't really tell from the farm picture, but that's northeastern side has about a 20% slope to it. Which I really dislike driving a tractor on, because we contour it, and trying to move chickens on that too is very difficult, because they start to drift. So terrain, you know, it can be a deterrent as well, or it can be just, it takes more time and reduces your efficiency. So in the end, just putting these back up, so just as kind of a process, so we went through all of that, and given, you know, just all the process of like how we go through setting this up, in the end, I probably won't put poultry on that, and I'll probably just rely on mineral applications, because our soil test didn't really indicate that it was a beneficial thing. In the future, it might, as we start, you know, extracting more nutrients from it, but at this point, I probably wouldn't put poultry on that field. So again, we go back through, are we managing the agroecosystem, the needs for the poultry, needs for the row crops, and are we providing something healthy for the customer? And if we are, then we keep going. And that's about it. So that says happy farming, and that's my email. So if you had any questions, if you are thinking about doing this, incorporating birds or in general, feel free to email me. You know, for example, like I didn't bring some documents, like we have our food safety training document. I would definitely, you know, forward that on to you, and if that's something you're interested in. I think even if you're producing just vegetables, I think it's a valuable tool to use. You know, if you're working with other people, even if yourself, you have something written down, you have a framework for how you are conducting yourself as you're working with something sensitive, like you know, a ready-to-eat non-cooked item, like a salad mix or something like that. So, thank you very much.